What, you think I'm just gonna stand there and take it? Actually, I am. Can you beat Deltarune chapters 3 and 4 without dodging? Hey there guys, NovemberJoy here, and welcome to the Reptile Rumble. After a very long wait, the 3rd and 4th chapters of Deltarune have released, and they very much lived up to people's expectations and surpassed them. Even with just 4 chapters out of 7, Deltarune's now a fully fledged RPG, complete with around 20 or so hours of runtime. But now that there's so much more game to go through, a lot of people were asking me, when am I going to continue the challenge I started with the first 2 chapters? That's what I'm here today to figure out. Can you beat the 3rd and 4th chapters of Deltarune without dodging? The rules are simple as before. Whenever I'm at the battle screen, I can't move while I'm being attacked. I'm allowed to do other things, just not move. As for optional challenges, I'm once again going to try for all recruits. And I'll see if I can defeat at least one secret boss from the newer chapters as well. But before we start, let's get into this video's sponsor, Super Water. Ever felt like your water was boring and normal? Well, you could supercharge it with this special filter and make it super water. But you might be wondering what makes the difference between regular water and super water. Well, you see, the super filter turns regular water into super water. Anyway, let's jump into the run. For our preparations, I did run through the first 2 chapters once again. You can watch the original video I made for the first 2 chapters with this card here. This time I came more prepared, made sure to use the spin cake since it's renewable, and gained a new piece of armor. By actually using frayed bow ties on everyone but Susie, blocking with Chris on the first turn, making good use of Rose's Fluffy Guard act, and even triggering the Big Shot exploit right as we start his final attack pattern, we can beat Spam to Neo by snapping his strings instead of beating him up, which gives us the much more useful Deal Maker instead of the nearly worthless Puppet Scarf. That's sure to help on the road ahead since it gives us +5 defense and +5 magic. With that and a whole lot of Butler juice in our inventory, we're ready to start Chapter 3. Chapter 3 starts with a somber monologue. Turns out Rose was just depressed the whole time. Honestly, that's understandable. His special moment gets rudely interrupted by our next fan favorite character, Tenna, who manages to guilt-trip Susie and the rest of the Lancer fan club into participating in his TV show. Most of it takes place in these little Legend of Tenna games that look like Link's Awakening. During these segments, we don't have anything to worry about because they're just mini-games. Or at least we don't have anything to worry about until we run into enemies, which starts a regular battle. You might be wondering how we do with these, since we're given ranks at the end of all the battles we encountered during these board sections. We're ranked based on how many turns we take, how many times we get hit, and how much TP we have at the end of the battle. Surprisingly, only one of those really hurts us. These shadow guys can be spared fairly quickly, meaning we don't have to worry about the turn part, and the TP is as simple as just building it up while we spare the enemies. The damage is only a part of our rank, meaning we can get a respectable A overall. As for the board itself, we generally don't have any issues answering questions and finding keys, pushing Rose around, or watching Rose drown. We also take the time to let Susie farm some points while we're at it. You'd think we'd struggle with the Weather Duo, considering it's a long battle where we're guaranteed to take a lot of hits. And yes, we do take a lot of hits. But hilariously, they're actually not that good at hitting a stationary target. As the Weather Duo becomes the Weather Uno, it's like the projectiles are deliberately dodging around us. We did still get a Z rank for damage, but getting an S rank on everything else keeps our rank at an A. Afterwards, we have a physical challenge ahead of us in the form of a cooking show. Since this is a minigame, I feel this is also okay for us to move in, meaning we can avoid fire and throw food directly at the customers like normal. With everything in mind, we were able to make up for our slightly worse battle performance in every other category and get an S rank overall, which is exactly what we were aiming for. Finishing the first board gets us into the green room, where we have a little freedom to explore and make some choices. We can also use those points to buy things at these vending machines, hence why we farmed them. We may have farmed too many in hindsight, though we did at least get the Toxic Axe for Susie. There's plenty of stuff to do. Talking to the Weather Uno, playing video games horribly, and fighting a water cooler. You'd think the water cooler would be a major issue, and its attacks do consistently hit us about 8 times per turn, but its attack power is surprisingly lower than its powerful aura would suggest. We can also spare it a little faster than normal with a little strategy. Susie and Rose are actually better off trying to spare the water cooler. The pity spare has been a mechanic since Chapter 1, but it wasn't until Chapter 2 that you could actually see its results. choosing to spare an enemy whose name isn't yellow actually increases their mercy meter a bit, and in rare cases this actually does more than S action or R action would do, with Chris contributing 10% by flirting and the other two contributing 8% each by spamming the spare key. It's just a matter of keeping everyone healthy until we finally get the mercy we begged for. We can also take some time with this gacha machine, slowly taking everything of worth from it. There's a few really nice items in here. The Tension Max is really nice to have in a tough spot. The Executive Buffet is a unique item that restores 100 HP to the party, making it a better club sandwich. The Tenna is a unique piece of armor that drops magic but has a defense stat of 5, making it perfect for Chris. Toby Fox is a cool guy. Revive mints are great to have around in general, and the blue ribbon, well, we might find a use for it in its slight buff to healing. I'd say we made good use of those points. The A rank room on the far left lets us play minigames. And believe it or not paying to unlock the SusieZilla one actually has strategic merit. How? Well, you might see later. Without further ado, let's finally head into the S rank room to peep on this guy and claim our free Saber 10, as much as we probably won't get much use out of it, and check out what the original game was like. It goes about as normal. Wander around this weird 8-bit area, discover a sword, murder absolutely everything to become stronger, then break the boundaries to get an ice key. I don't see anything ominous about this. Speaking of not ominous, here's Tenna taking a secret phone call. Or antenna call? Is he the phone? I'm not sure, but it's already time for the second board. Second board is pretty similar. Chris gets a camera, which is used for a handful of things, but doesn't change up the gameplay too much. The battles along the way might actually be easier, since Pippinses can easily be spared in a single round just by having Susie and Ralsei do the acting. I had to sandbag and defend a lot just to meet the TP goals. Moss is consumed, controllers are swapped, Rule's card gets robbed, and we encounter an even easier mini-boss in the form of Shutta. Shutta is another example of an enemy that gains more mercy from the pity spare than from S or R action. 10% in fact. That means we can spare Shutta incredibly quickly. So quickly in fact that I actually ended the battle earlier than I intended. We can still live with a B rank, thankfully. Even once we create a filthy relationship between the weather and the rules and move on to the physical challenge, it's a lot easier than the last one because it's a rhythm game with only 2 buttons. Ralsei's lyrical talents are appreciated though. We managed to T-rank this one fairly easily. In fact, with the extra knowledge I had, I think I actually did better in this challenge than I did on my first playthrough. Guess the battle rankings don't matter that much in the end, huh? Now that we're back in the green room, there's not too much more to do besides enjoying the spoils of the T-rank room and playing the second part of the original game in the S-rank room. We go to Northern Light, recruit the White Cloak, begin the Forbidden Path with Ice Magic, and freeze everything in our way as we use her up. Nope, still not seeing anything weird here, what about you? We also have to fight a Zapper who has surprisingly poor aim and enter a few parental codes. Nothing too significant. Oh, hey, look, we found Toriel. And Tenna found us finding Toriel. Well, that's gonna make him pretty gloomy. He tries to get things back on track, eventually resorting to trapping the party inside gotchi balls and forcing them to watch him play. I guess this technically makes Tenna a Let's Player? This section is full of quizzes, minigames, and battles where Tenna turns all of our buttons into act buttons. Thankfully, we're not doing the no acting challenge, so we'll be fine. Before too long, we managed to click off of Tenna's horrible Let's Play and start exploring the TV world proper. Things go mostly normally, the cowboy minigame works exactly as normal, and neither the encounters nor quizzes pose much trouble. We did end up suffering a truly embarrassing death, though. Even when things aren't that challenging, we still need to be careful. Now, if only we could really play Ralsei Rancher. We do at least get to watch Tenna cast Foam Grave, though. Once we make it back to the cooking show set, though, we have a new problem on our hands. Rule's card, and his harem. Rules takes a page from Tenna and Azrael by removing our options, forcing us to only act every turn. This one feels more like a minigame than a battle, trying to hit the Lancer icons and avoid the Rules icons. Just by looking at this fight, you'd think we'd be done for. We can't use any magic or items, meaning we have no way to heal. Or do we? Turns out, if you're doing really badly, you'll see green hearts appear. They don't progress the battle, but they do heal each party member for about half of their max HP. It might sound like that makes things easy, but there is one attack that's still difficult to survive. The laser pointer attack. This one not only has enough projectiles to hit us consistently, but it also goes on for way longer than most other attacks. It hits us about 15 times, which takes our party from near full to near death in one turn. The important thing, though, is that our defensive gear gives us enough durability to survive. And we even get 2 hearts afterwards due to our party still being in poor health after the first one. The attacks after that one are much shorter and much less harsh, so we can fairly easily get back on our feet and finish reuniting the weather duo. Or they can make a true throuple with the original Starwalker. I guess that's okay too? Afterwards, Tenna loses all his employees, and then we have the final segment of the original game, which starts with us stabbing Susie and Rolsey to open a new path. I'm sure that's not foreshadowing at all. We head through this dungeon stabbing everything, defeat John Mantle, and get the Shadow Mantle for ourselves, which might just be more useful than you would expect. Nothing else after that but to load up on deluxe dinners and head out into the snow to face Tenna, who was a lot more of a challenge than I expected. The first issue is the minigames. These were totally okay by our rules before because they didn't take place during battle, but this time they do. Not only that, but they also hurt a ton if we don't play them correctly, which we often can't, so the minigame acts are off the table. That also puts violence off the table, since Tenna starts using minigames in place of his attacks once his HP drops below half. What are we gonna do then? Well, we can always aim to butter him up by just telling him how much we love TV. So we have a steady way to increase our score, but we still have to worry about surviving. Tenna will only use 3 attacks in a loop, but 2 of them are really bad for our health. All-Star Cast is the first in the rotation, and it's the easiest one since it doesn't hit us that many times. Smash Cut hurts a lot more, since it's guaranteed to hit us 4 or 5 times for plenty of damage. And it gets followed up by Rim Shot for about 5 or 6 more hits of high damage before looping back to All-Star Cast. One tool we do have is the Shadow Mantle. All-Star Cast and Rim Shot both deal star damage, which gets cut by 2/3 for the character wearing the mantle. Susie can absorb quite a few hits that way, though she still has to worry about Smash Cut. Once we get into a pattern, we just have to survive and prioritize having Chris act. When multiple party members use I Love TV in a single turn, it makes Chris's I Love TV act stronger, and that bonus sticks around for the rest of the fight. That means they can make a lot more progress than Susie and Rolsey can by themselves. Getting to 1000 score is the easy part though, because that triggers Tenna's final attack, which is a minigame rush. Now we have to talk about the different minigames and how they treat us. The rock concert one treats us just fine since we don't have to move, but it only appears once at the very beginning, so we can't rely on it. The cooking game is one of the better ones since we can jump over the floor flames, even though you might still have fire drop right on top of you. The weather game is nice since even doing absolutely nothing, we still don't get hit most of the time. The sharpshooter game depends. We can't move the crosshair, but depending on our reflexes and the projectile positions, we can still sometimes hit them with our own attacks. The worst ones, though, are the cowboy games, since we're almost guaranteed to get hit. The one where the fun gang is shooting has the cursor stuck in the middle, but Tenna does still sometimes spawn there. The version where Tenna is shooting at the fun gang doesn't have any patterns that don't hit the center, meaning we just get to watch Tenna hit the fun gang in the face repeatedly live on TV. This is also why we didn't unlock the Susie Zilla minigame earlier. If we did, it would appear during this minigame rush, and it would be a horrible option for us since we wouldn't be able to move. This minigame rush would spell guaranteed death if it weren't for damage scaling with our current HP. The lower our HP is, the less damage each hit deals. That's good, since we're gonna be taking at least a dozen hits before we even make it to the Defeat Tenna segment. We can't move the crosshair during the Defeat Tenna segment, but the angle of Rolsey's shots and Tenna's random movement along the floor mean that we can still hit his head some of the time. We will be taking a ton of hits the whole time, though, so this depends heavily on if we have any HP left after the minigame rush to weather the storm. On the winning attempt, Susie only had 6 HP left, and the other 2 were already down. I'm surprised how tough this was. This was the toughest part of the chapter so far, by far. Of course, if you know about this chapter, you probably know what's coming up next, and don't worry, I did give it the best try I could. We get to see Tenna's arms cleaved right off by, who guessed it, the Roaring Knight. I can't say I was expecting to see them this early, and all I can say is it goes about as you'd expect. To our credit, we can at least survive the first attack. These stars are fired in a random pattern and will typically only hit us a couple of times since they tend to avoid the center. The second attack murders us. Not only does it deal ludicrous amounts of damage, but attacks in Deltarune can have different amounts of after-hit invincibility frames. This one has after-hit invincibility frames perfectly spaced, so they run out right as the next knife hits us. I did do some experimentation with the other attacks just for curiosity's sake. The box splitter deals insane damage, as you'd expect. The sword hallway is arguably the most merciful attack since it deals much less damage. Plus, the sword strike at the end can completely miss our stationary soul. The cross-slash attack works about as expected, downing everyone but the Shadow Mantle holder. Though, bizarrely, the first slash completely misses you if you're stationary? Is it just a warning shot or something? Up to this point, I kept a little bit of hope that maybe it'd help if we could clone the Shadow Mantle or find some other glitch that would help, but my experimentation mostly ended once I tried the final attack. This attack that resembles Hyper Garner works completely differently, even compared to the other screen-filling final attacks we've dealt with so far. It completely ignores any defense you may have, including from the defend command, and deals a flat 40 damage to the party with each hit. If the damage would down a character, it does, but if multiple characters would be downed, it just downs one and leaves the others with 1 HP. That means we can survive a maximum of 5 hits. Rolsei goes down on the 4th hit, and Chris goes down on the 5th hit. Problem is, the Knight also has a suction effect. It brings our soul towards the center where all the projectiles are aiming, meaning we have no hope of even reaching the second part of the attack. Now, technically, if we'd used violence, we might have a little more HP, but that would only let us survive 1 extra hit at best, which I don't think would make any difference. The Knight's basically trying to absorb our soul, which they thankfully can't do. As disappointing as it may be, we just have to move forward. I'll be honest, I didn't think we could beat the Knight, but we at least had to try. Undyne gets stolen and taken to the bunker, Chris opens the door to darkness, and there's Chapter 3 cleared. A mostly simple chapter with a couple of major bumps along the way. Chapter 4 starts with a very long hometown segment. Honestly, this is kinda nice since it breaks up the gameplay as much as it does. Susie gets lured into a church service by delicious pancakes, dresses up like a Boy Scout, reveals she knows how to clean up blood, all kinds of fun stuff. One bangin' sermon later, we enjoy the church-flavored juice, taunt Alphys by drinking her juice combo right in front of her, and question what Rudy did to that key lime pie before inviting ourselves over to the holiday house. For now, though, it's back to Castletown. A few things have changed there, one of them being that Susie taught Rolsei the ooh-woo voice. How the hell does she even know what that is? Interestingly, I wasn't able to find the night items in Castletown like what you'd expect. Guess we'll see if that becomes a problem in later chapters, right? We have a number of new things to check out. The main one is a love dojo featuring a single new battle against El Nina and La Nino. It's much harder than the first one. At first it looks pretty simple, just picking the correct act based on the weather forecast, even if these flames get in the way. Until we get their mercy above a certain percentage. At that point, they'll congratulate us on catching on to their weather forecast before starting a new attack pattern. This one resembles the Weather Channel attack Tenna used, except this one just doesn't end until the cloud and moon projectiles have touched our umbrella a total of 20 times. We just have to hope they bounce into the umbrella our stationary soul is holding up and not the soul itself. If it were just that, it'd be pretty simple, but the next attack requires us to rack up 60 bounces. That's super luck dependent even before we factor in rules rudely butting in, turning the bullet box into absolute chaos with 3 bouncing projectiles and constant lightning spraying everywhere. On the successful attempt, we barely made it through, with only Chris 1 hit away from death. And to think we did all this for an executive buffet. Hey, who knows, we might really need it? The mic battle can't be played without mic input and wouldn't be much different with mic input, so I decided to skip it. We have a little tea party, infect Rolsei's room with the icy cryptid, watch Hometown fall into chaos, dine with Susie, and then finally go meet up with Noelle. While we're there, we take some time to investigate, making sure to steal one of her pencils along the way. It becomes the Jingle Blade once we end up in the Dark World, and it's the best sword Chris can equip that gives a defense boost. Unfortunately, we investigate a bit too much into Dessa's room and anger the Chris, who stuffs us in a box. They probably assumed that since we never moved, they could just put us there and we wouldn't bother to leave. They were wrong on that assumption, so we immediately escaped to the vents. We eavesdrop on a suspicious phone conversation while watching Chris drink an entire bottle of chocolate syrup, cause some general mischief, and then anger Chris further by trying again to investigate Dessa's room, where they proceed to lock us in the closet and beat us repeatedly with a hockey stick. I imagine this is just them taking out their frustration on the soul now that they know we can totally move and we're just intentionally choosing not to. There's not too much more afterwards. The Grinch arrives to ruin Christmas, the rain begins, and we find out there's darkness lurking in the church. It starts with us running all the way up to the night. Not so tough when we're not in battle, huh? We then get pushed off a ledge and shatter a window, Rolsei shatters Susie's self-esteem, and we assemble the party to begin the Dark Sanctuary properly. The enemies we encounter can be spared fairly easily as we figure out what the true prophecy says. We get spooked in the dark before meeting up with a very important character for this chapter, Gerson. For the next couple of fights, he shows up as an act. In the first one, his acts are purely comedic and helpful, but the second one scared me for a sec. I genuinely thought I was soft-locked when he tossed out his cane for me to follow. At least, until the attack just kinda ended. Huh. We make our way to the old man's study, which lets us buy stuff and access more of the Dark Sanctuary. We grab the Scarf Mark since it increases Ralsei's defense, some Wafer Guards since 4 defense is an upgrade, then head towards the library. Doing a little more battling and puzzle solving, we grab another important piece of gear, the Absorb Axe, which is the second best weapon available for Susie in this chapter. I decided to do some donating. 10,000 Dark Dollars worth of it, in fact. I used this Gwei Balthazar encounter to grind money since we can finish it quickly and without taking too much damage. Did you know you can spare a Balthazar in one turn if you're good enough at mashing Chris's solo Shake Act? Well, now you do. Anyway, it's finally time to descend into the Dark Forbidden Zone and discover a battle a lot of you may have been waiting for. Jackenstein is waiting for us at the bottom, and his fight required the dumbest strategy I've ever had to use in any challenge I've tried thus far. So, a quick lesson on how Deltarune handles battles differently from Undertale. Every enemy attack in the game has a set duration, after which the attack ends. Since that's a hard-coded assumption of Deltarune's battle system, what does it do for attacks that aren't meant to end that way, like Jackenstein's maze attacks? Well, it just uses the classic method of setting the duration to a stupidly high number that will never be seen in standard gameplay. To be more specific, it sets the enemy turn to last for 999,999 frames. Since Deltarune runs at 30 frames per second, that's roughly 9 hours and 15 minutes. So for every one of Jack's maze attacks, we're waiting about that long for it to end on its own. This required that I just leave my system on the whole time and use a lot of patience, taking longer than anyone else ever has to complete this fight. I was actually worried about the last maze attack since I thought one of these bouncing projectiles might be able to enter the starting room, and if it's even remotely possible, it will happen given how much time it has to do so. Thankfully though, it can't leave the room it's in. Once the maze attacks run out, Jack only uses this treasure ring attack, which will deal some damage, but also give us plenty of treasure to get our TP up with. That brings us to the other issue, when we become too bright. Jack will run away from us to stop us from lighting up his face. His movements are somewhat random, but he will still try to get away from us, meaning we can't make any real progress towards ending the battle. However, given what my rules are in the title of this video, well, we can't exactly take damage here, can we? In fact, we deal damage to him, or at least to his self-esteem. As a result, I feel it's within the spirit of the challenge to chase him enough to light him up, finally putting an end to a 94-hour-long battle. I'm surprised the gang didn't just collapse from exhaustion, although apparently my computer almost did. Susie gets over her self-esteem issues and we get the climb claws, which open the way for us to play some piano, and go seal the fountain. However, why do that when we still have more Sanctuary to explore? There's a few different places to go to find the pieces of an optional piano melody. One of them is back in the library, leading to a nice little tea party, while the other two require slightly more backtracking. The last one we headed for actually introduces us to a new enemy, the Holy Water Cooler. This one's trickier than the water coolers from Chapter 3, mainly because it has way more attack power. It's also a bit harder to spare, though begging for mercy at least works against it. The hardest part was theft. Once you get her to reveal her true form as Miss Mizzle, Chris and Susie have a duo act called Embezzle that tries to steal an item from the target, and she has a unique item called the Bitter Tear that I wanted. I just got really bad RNG, so it took about 13 attempts to steal it, but we were able to weather the storm in the end. Anyway, we have something very interesting ahead of us. After all, we didn't get those piano melodies for nothing. They give us access to the chamber where the magic axe is stored. Though we're not getting it without a little test from the old Hammer of Justice. Thing is, if we follow the rules for the spirit of the challenge, this isn't an interesting fight to talk about. This is a solo battle with only Susie, where Gerson's damage is scaled based on Susie's current HP. However, there is still a minimum amount of damage he can deal to you, and the damage will add up. And uniquely, we can't use any items during the battle because Gerson steals them. Even with the damage scaling, Susie can only really survive about 3 or 4 turns before she goes down. Okay, heal would help a lot if we could get enough TP to cast it, but even then that would only buy us like 1 extra turn at most. Honestly, this just feels like Gerson's bullying us, especially since he dodges our attacks, which is the one thing we can't do. However, if we were willing to bend the rules a bit, since the green soul mode disallows you from moving anyway, this fight actually gets a lot more interesting. First, for equipment, I just went with the Absorbax, Dealmaker, and Tenna. You'd be surprised how much the defense helps, and OK Heal barely scales with Susie's magic stat regardless. This one requires that we strategize and memorize Gerson's attack pattern. It seems at first like we just have to survive, but fighting, casting Brood Buster, and casting OK Heal all increase Gerson's mercy meter as shown by these stars, even if it's not reflected in his bar. Even if we can't hit Gerson, swinging with fight is our best option most of the time since that gets us 24% TP and progress towards a win. The first turns of the battle are all about blocking, and especially perfect blocking since that gets us a little extra TP. We can fit in one Brood Buster during the first couple of turns for a little more progress than fighting, and we will get our TP back by the time we need it again. Speaking of needing our TP, here's the first Red Soul attack. This one hits us so many times that defending isn't actually a bad idea. It's followed immediately afterwards by a hammer attack, which will finish you off if you aren't blocking sufficiently. Now that Susie's HP is critical, we need to keep our guard up even more and time our OK Heal usage correctly. Now is also a good time to mention a little known mechanic. The more Susie uses OK Heal, the stronger and cheaper it gets, down to 75% TP and a significantly better heal. The next important checkpoint is the second hammer attack. If we can make it through that, we should be able to make it to Gerson's final attack patterns. Gerson's final attack pattern is a series of difficult attacks that each give massive mercy gain if you survive them. The first attack of his final pattern is his hammer circle, but we've surprisingly done well enough at this battle that the mercy gain from this attack is enough to end it. Susie finally figures out the gimmick and gives Gerson a close shave, finishing off a surprisingly fun battle and earning a Shadow Crystal. Now, I'm going to move forward as if I didn't do this, since I do feel like blocking is against the spirit of the challenge. But if the Shadow Crystals actually become important later on, I might keep this solution in mind. Either way, I guess I learned something from this. Before we go seal the fountain though, let's do a little grinding. The missile enemies you encounter can also be embezzled from. Most of the time, you'll get random healing items, but there's roughly a 10% chance we can get a revivement this way, making this the only infinite source of revivements in the game. I might have farmed too much, given I did this for about 2 hours before sealing the fountain. Wait, you thought we only had to seal one fountain? Nope, this is Chapter 4. Susie's here to give us more content by making a dark fountain of her own looking for a door code. I weirdly love the second sanctuary. The music, the cool lighting effect, and the strange and threatening atmosphere all combine together to create a very unique aesthetic. One thing it does lack, though, is access to the same resources the Dark Sanctuary had. So we have to hope these Scar Elixirs and other items we farmed earlier are sufficient. We encounter a few new enemy types along the way, though most of them aren't too difficult to defeat. We can't use the Harmonize Act with the Organics, but it's not a major problem. You get attacked repeatedly as you go through the second sanctuary, but it's not all violence. We can finally get the reward for our excessive donation, the Gold Widow. It slightly drops the money earned from battle, but that's no problem when it has 5 defense. After taking a dive, we end up escaping from a horde of fuzzies before arriving back at the study. Here we can buy Rhapsodies. And only Rhapsodies, meaning those Scar Elixirs we saved are important. We have a quick fight on our hands with the Sound of Justice ahead that's going to require those items. It starts off very interesting. We're stuck with Susie alone, unable to issue any commands while she tries to talk sense into the enemy. We can't block the incoming arrows, so she goes down quickly without healing. Thankfully, it's not game over in this case. It just causes Chris to arrive and defend her earlier than usual, and starts her at 1 HP once the battle begins again. There's not much we can do here besides survive, so we're going to be burning through a lot of items. Importantly, Susie can't play the role of tank very well in this fight. She won't take any commands besides using items, so we can't have her defend to reduce incoming damage. I didn't realize this initially, so I ended up losing badly to the penultimate attack. Once I got the memo, I set up my inventory with 10 Scar Elixirs and 2 Rhapsodies and made a strategy. As soon as Chris rejoins, throw the Rhapsodies at Susie. Then use Scar Elixirs the rest of the time while blocking with Chris and hoping they get targeted more often. This ended up working, letting me barely survive the penultimate attack and make it to the end. where Susie learns the truth and Rolse shows off his true self in more ways than one in an emotional scene. That gets us through the second sanctuary, only leaving the third sanctuary ahead of us. Honestly, there's not that much to talk about here. This one feels a lot shorter than the second sanctuary, and has less combat and stuff. It does give us an opportunity to buy items again though, alongside losing a race to Tricky Tony and listening to a great song that doesn't get enough time to play. The fountain's calling to us. A couple of combat encounters, a cool segment where we jump this piano over some gaps, and we're practically there. Now we just need a little help from a very patient friend to get up this wall, followed by tanking a lot of swords to the face, which we are already very experienced at. We need to prepare a special item inventory for what's coming up. I went with 6 Scar Elixirs, 2 Revivements, the Spin Cake, and all the tension items I had lying around, then kitted everyone for maximum defense. It's finally time to approach the fountain, where the knight has been patiently waiting for us. Susie tells a very funny joke. So funny, the knight decides a titan needs to hear it as well. We get to climbing, which wasn't any more difficult than usual, and now we get to an interesting part. This titan spawn battle. Uniquely, it comes between the previous save point and the boss of this chapter, meaning we have to deal with it while conserving our resources as best as possible. They have about 3,000 or so HP, which means violence isn't an option. Instead, we're going to try to save up 64% TP to banish them. We can do that in about 4 turns, so we only need to endure 3 attacks. The first one is a freebie because, bizarrely enough, standing completely still is a valid strategy against these little spawns. They'll dissolve into orbs before they get to us. The other 2 attacks, though, have these red thingies coming towards us. These won't dissolve, and they'll aim straight for our soul, so they'll hit us no matter what. I plotted out my actions using 1 Scar Elixir to keep Chris up and banished them away, leaving 11 items for the Titan battle. One more climbing section later, we find out it's been here the whole time. The Titan, also known as the battle I was preparing for before I even started. This thing normally isn't too bad, but it does deal a ton of damage alongside constricting our TP gain. Those 2 things could very well prove deadly over a long battle. The main thing we have to hope for in this battle is for our Shadow Mantle holder to be targeted as often as possible. The Shadow Mantle resists all of the Titan's dark attacks. I chose to keep it on Susie since she has the highest HP and a built-in way to heal without using TP or items by swinging the Absorb Axe. This battle revolves heavily around building up TP so we can unleash to take down the Titan's shield and deal some real damage. Susie can deal decent chip damage even while the Titan's shield is up. The Titan's first phase isn't too overly damaging for us outside of this snake attack. The hand attack can even miss us sometimes. Once we build up enough TP to unleash and take down the Titan's shield, it's more important than ever that we're hitting crits on our attacks. Damage dealt to the Titan is multiplied by 5 times while it's vulnerable, meaning that small damage increase becomes like 1 to 200 extra points of damage. The Titan uses a new attack while its shield is down, but it's actually not the worst attack in its arsenal, so it almost works as a break while we deal damage. The second phase makes all the attacks harsher on us, so we want to try to speed through this one quickly. A Tension Gem to gain 50% TP will do the trick, alongside the Spin Cake to keep the party healthy while they deal another large chunk of damage. The third phase is where our supplies are definitely running out, and it only takes a little bad luck with the targeting to down Chris or Rolse. Rolse being down is workable, since he's mostly here to use items and contribute a bit of extra damage while the Titan's vulnerable, but we can't progress the battle without Chris. This is what those revivements are for. I made sure to use the tension bit to guarantee we'd have the TP to throw out Unleash right as Rolse got back up. One more hit, which dealt more damage than I expected, and the Titan went into its regenerating phase. Now we just have to wait for old man Gerson to put those bullying skills to good use by lending a hand in our time of need. With his support, the Titan gets dunked on. This was a surprisingly exhilarating battle, and it turned out to be more possible than I initially thought. Funnily enough, at the end of this, the only item I had left was the Tension Max. Guess we'll see when I end up eating that one. Afterwards, Susie rushes ahead and disagrees slightly with the last prophecy, and we get a very important dialogue choice with Rolse. I can't do that, not even for a YouTube bit. As Susie gives a heartfelt speech and we seal the fountain, we realize that we really were in there for 4 days. We missed the festival. Undyne probably got turned into sushi by now. I guess we really did take too long. We take a moment on the lakeside to reminisce, then head home. Only to find that Toriel and Sans have been doing the jitterbug together and drinking for 4 days straight without a single thought spared for Chris or Susie. Susie was so surprised that she just left, leaving Chris to head up to bed and try to forget this whole experience happened. But, as much as it'd be nice to just forget, they did make a promise to endure whatever stupid challenge runs people want to do. And that's the end of Chapter 4. There we go, we've successfully completed everything Deltarune has to offer as of this recording. Sadly, we couldn't truly beat either of the new Shadow Crystal holders. I think this did turn out to be an interesting challenge. I never expected Tenna to ever be a difficult fight, nor that I'd have a strategy to compete with the Super Mario 64 A-button challenge's wait times. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hit the like button to signal that you love this kind of content, and stab your blade into the subscribe button to unleash a dark world of videos just like this one. See you guys next time on the Reptile Rumble.